So, in this section, I want to talk to you about some of the exam habits and mindsets that are, used by essentially the most effective students or top students. So, these are some of the things that I've learned over time that how this is how essentially they think about these exams, and these are the things, some of the things that they do. So, these are some of the things that we will be covering in our sections as well. But I wanted to give you a specific how they specifically think about the exam and what are some of the things they do quickly, so we can get into deeper of them later on. So one of the things that I've noticed that top students do is, let me move this. So in this section, I want to talk to you about some of the exam habits and mindsets used by highly effective students. So these are the things that I believe that helps them to become more successful, and also help them get the grades they want, and help them learn the material much more deeply. So I will be going them through them quickly with you, so you will know exactly how top students essentially you know how top students essentially think about these exams, and what they do and what they think about how to study for it. So one of the first things that I've noticed, that they have this mindset of pushing the ball forward, right? So one of the things I see that they continually do is that, right, when they started to study, they think about how to improve their knowledge, how to push the ball forward in terms of understanding it. They don't really set to understand things right away, and they know that they cannot understand things right away, right? So what they focus on, and essentially, is how do I push the ball forward in order to get this material. So this is one of the very specific, very unique things that I've seen with these students, and which leads to actually the next point. These students generally focus on studying to master the material rather than trying to get a high grade. So even when I was in university, this is one of the things I learned from these top students, is that when they get together to study, they focus on like learning the material really well rather than focusing on achieving a specific grade. So their effort is solely focused on mastering the material or learning the material, rather than worrying about the grade that they will be getting or they will not be getting, right? So this is something I've seen. And another thing I notice is that when you're in university, you really have no way to tell what sort of questions will coming up on the exam. The only thing you can be really know whether you did well is your effort, whether you studied well, and whether you did everything you can to master the material with your effort. You cannot tell really which grade that you will be getting on the exam, because you have no idea how hard or how challenging or how easy your professor is going to make that exam. So you cannot put that blame on you. Only thing you can really focus on your effort that you'll be providing to study for the exam, right? So that's something that I want you to think about. The next thing is that these students continually create, they consistently create a study plan before they start studying. Essentially, study plan involves creating specific key tasks for them to complete. For it could be for their week, for the chapters, whatever it may be. They create a specific tasks to complete in order to learn the material. They don't just go say, "Oh, I'm just gonna review, watch a video and do the readings." They identify, okay, I'm gonna watch the video. That's one thing. Next thing, what are they going to do? Are you going to do questions, or are you going to do your readings? What are you going to do? They have a plan. They don't just do it out of whim, right? So writing a plan, that's something I've seen them do, is they continually write a specific plan or have a specific list of items for each of the weeks or each of the chapters or each of the sections they need to cover for them before they begin studying, right? So that's something I've noticed that they usually do. And another interesting pattern that I've seen, or another mindset that these students usually take on, is essentially they're willing to do whatever it takes to essentially study and get the grades they want. Like, one of the things when I say that when they get the grades one is that they're willing to do whatever it takes to master the material to get the grades they want. Like I said before, you cannot really determine what grades you can get. Only thing you can do is master the material. So they're willing to do whatever it takes to master the material first, and they know if they were to master the material, they will be that essentially grades will be automatically given to them, right? So if you show up to the exam and you know the stuff really well, it will be really difficult for you to not the grades that you deserve to get if it's written in a fair way, right? So that's one of the things I want you to think about is how willing are you to do the work. How, what is your level of willingness to do the work is a key component to know how much grades that you what grade you will get and how much you will learn from the course. The next point is one of the things that they continue to do. They are very freely giving study advice to others, and they're willing to help others study. So what I mean by that is they're willing to teach people. They're willing to work with other people, and I see this is a pattern among top students. And they're willing to become teachers quickly if others need help. It could be the fact that they are so familiar with the material and they want to give it out. It could be the fact that they, based on the law, natural law, right? What you give on to others is what you get. Is they know and practice this technique actively, because they realize when they continually teach others, they actually get helped on the long run. So this is another thing that I've noticed among these top students. And another thing I noticed is that they have an objective or goal before they start studying. What I notice is that they say, for example, if they're going to study for their lecture videos or lecture slides, they say, I'm going to study these 20 slides within this hour, right? So very specific target that they set in their mind before they studying. So that's like what they do right before they start. They think about, what am I going to accomplish, while I'm sitting down here. They don't just say, how much ever I study, how much is how I study. They don't actually do it that way. They actually have a goal. Like, it could be you're going to read one chapter within the next 2 hours you are studying, right? Next 2 hours of studying, right? You're going to read one chapter. That could be like your primary goal, and then the time that you set is 2 hours for that. So this is the type of pattern that I have seen how these students essentially go about into their studying. And another pattern, interesting pattern, actually, this is an important pattern, I would say, that they perform repeated reviews, repeated revisions on what they studied. And I see that many students actually who are average students or below average students, they tend to only study about 1 or 2 times their material and doesn't repeatedly revise what is in order to get the material into the long term, into the memory. So that's one of the things I would recommend you also do, is that essentially focus on, leave time to do repeated revisions if you can. And I've seen some cases, even including myself, that I would sometimes study the same material about 7 times in order to understand, really get the material and really grasp it. Because how much can you really understand by reading the textbook once or twice, right? So what about if you read it 3-4 times? You will understand obviously a lot more, and you will have a lot more familiarity with the material, right? So that's something I would ask you to look into doing, is keep time to study repeatedly the material. And the other thing I noticed that they do is that they are very quick to use online resources to clarify concepts. They are not afraid to say, what, I don't know how to do this. Let me go look it up, right? They're not afraid to do that. They don't have problems with not knowing the material and then going and looking for the information that they need to know on places like YouTube, on places like Google. And even if you are taking math courses, I will highly recommend that use Khan Academy. So they're not afraid to quickly do that. And this is something I noticed, that they're very quick to clarify anything that they don't understand, and they're willing to use whatever the medium, whatever the source that can help them with that. And they quickly understand it, and then however they understand it, they start to write it down, or they keep a note of what they understood. And that way they don't need to keep looking into the information over and over again. They write it down what they understood, so they have it for later. So this is one of the things I recommend, that we will talk about creating study packages. That's something that actually, the next point talks about, is that they usually create a formula sheet or a study package. Essentially, a formula sheet or a study package is essentially it's a document that you personally create to write down all the key notes and key concepts that you think will be important for you to know for your exam. So this package can include like multiple pages, right? And you basically take this and you continue study this over and over again. This is something I continually do, even when I'm taking courses now. Is I take essentially write all the notes and things I need to know, and I write down on one specific package. And I usually use a white paper that, and we actually will talk about it more on how to create these. And the next one something that I've noticed that they do is that they continually study what they got wrong all the time. Like, especially if they do an exam, and they didn't get the grade they wanted, they quickly go and study what they get wrong. And this is something I don't see many students do, because they're afraid to see what they got wrong, and because it makes them feel bad to see what they have got wrong, and to go quick and then change that or quick correct that. So they think there is like a personal attack on them for not knowing, right? So instead of looking at that way, I recommend also for you to, if you have done exams in the past, in your midterms or other exam, study intensively what you have gotten wrong, because these are essentially where your blockages are, where you have having a hard time moving through the material, right? So like, do exams and find what you get wrong and study them. This is a very important advice I see top students, very very important technique that I see top students are doing, right? So this is something that I recommend that you look into doing. And the next thing is that they continually study the details. They don't only study the concepts of material. They sometimes study the details, really deeply. Doesn't mean that you need to go study the all the details in your textbook like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, that sometimes there are key details associated into your lecture notes that you should know, right? So I see that sometimes professors insert these key details to see if you're actually paying attention to the lectures. So one of the things that make sure that you take time and make sure you leave effort, like basically you put effort to study the details in your lecture slides at least, so that way everything inside of your lectures. And this will become really important for you to help you master the course and master the study material. So learn the details of your lectures, because like I always say to people, your lecture material specifically has your favorite material, that your professors essentially your favorite material, right? And usually what shows up on your exams is your professor's favorite material. So if there are specific details and things like that that is written on those lectures, I highly recommend that you study them, and very likely these will be tested on the exam. So if you're a university student, this is very important advice, to begin with your studying with your lectures and study the details in these lectures. All right, so that's that point. And the next point is that they understand, studying for university is a once in a lifetime opportunity. How many times are you going to do your bachelor's degree? How many times are you going to do your master's degree? How many times are you going to do the same certification, right? Probably only once. So really understanding that you only doing this once is an important aspect, to at least that I see that they understand, that they're willing to put whatever it takes, and they're willing to put the effort that it takes, understanding it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So that's something I want you to think about when you're approaching for your exams, and really be willing to put the time and effort, because it is a once in a lifetime opportunity if you're studying for your exams, right? um, and the next thing I see that they do is that they study whenever and wherever. So this is something I also did, is like I used to work like 40 hours when I was in university, working on a marketing job and also working as a security guard. I had to like study whenever and wherever. I didn't have the luxury of, spending, taking the time, okay, go study this at this for 2 hours or things like that. I had to study during, when I'm in on taking the bus, or when I'm in between classes and things like that, is where I really had to study. So know that, when you're studying and when you're doing these tasks, you be willing to study whenever and wherever in order to push the ball forward with regards to learning the material. And if you take on this mindset, it will really help you be easy with how much information you pick up when you're studying, and it will be make it easier for you to study for other things even when you don't have the best of circumstances, right? And also, you don't need to study what, like I say, is study with what's easy for you first. Don't need to study things that are complicated when you're not in a place that you can do math problems and you're trying to do it in the bus, right? So that's not practical. Start with what something that is easy for you to study, and then get the ball rolling, and then you can get into the more complicated material, right? The easy, what I mean by easy, you can even do like a review of some things you already studied, right? Reviews are super important, as I talked about, right? So these are the things that these are the essentially the habits and the mindsets that I would recommend that you take on and start to think about a little bit more deeply. That I believe that will help you get the same grades as top students. Okay. All right. See you on the next one.